The stone that closed itself, an ancient folklore from Borneo, where the rainforest stretches endlessly and the air feels older than time itself. There is a stone no one dares to touch. It rests quietly beside an overgrown path, half swallowed by moss and roots, as if the forest itself is trying to hide it from curious eyes. At a distance, it looks ordinary, but when you stand close, you see it, a perfect split running straight through its center. Not a crack, not a fracture. A deliberate opening. The elders say the stone was never broken. They say it chose to close. This story was never carved into wood or written on paper. It survived because people were afraid to forget it. It was whispered at night, spoken only when the fire burned low and the jungle grew quiet enough to listen back. They say the stone listened once, and it has been waiting ever since. Long before maps gave names to the land, before the world knew the word Borneo, there was a small settlement, hidden beneath towering trees and thick canopies. The villagers lived close together, not because they feared the forest, but because they respected it. Life there followed the rhythm of nature. When the rain came, they waited. When the river rose, they listened. When the forest fell silent, they stayed still. They believed the land was alive, not as a belief, but as a fact. Trees were witnesses, rivers were judges, and stones were older than memory. Children were taught from the moment they could walk that words mattered. Not all words, but certain ones, spoken in anger, spoken carelessly, could travel farther than intended, because in the forest, nothing truly disappears. Among the villagers lived a woman who raised her child alone. No one spoke of the father, and the woman never explained. Some believed he had gone into the jungle one morning and simply never returned. Others believed the forest had taken him as payment for something long forgotten. The woman did not correct them. She worked harder than most. Every day began before sunrise and ended long after the sky turned dark. She gathered roots, hunted small animals, and carried water from the river with aching arms. Her face was calm, but her eyes carried a quiet exhaustion that never left. Her child followed her everywhere. The child was curious, always asking questions about the forest, about the stones, about why certain places were avoided. Sometimes the child walked too slowly, sometimes too fast. Sometimes they wandered off the path. Each time, the woman called them back. Her patience, however, grew thinner with every passing season. One afternoon, the heat pressed down so heavily it felt like the forest itself was breathing onto their skin. The air was thick. The insects were silent. Even the leaves barely moved. They were returning home after a long day. The child complained of hunger, of sore feet, of how far the village still was. The woman said nothing. Her silence grew heavier than words. As they walked, they reached a large stone beside the path. It stood where two old trails once crossed, worn smooth by time and rain. The stone was wide enough to sit on, wide enough for a child to climb. And the child did, laughing, playing, refusing to come down. The woman stopped. She called the child's name once, then again. Her voice echoed strangely, as if the forest swallowed the sound before it could travel far. When the child did not move, frustration broke through her exhaustion. Her voice sharpened, carrying more weight than she realized. She stepped closer and spoke words she believed were empty words, meant only to scare. "If you want to stay there so badly," she said, "then let the stone take you." The forest went still. Not slowly, not naturally, instantly. Instantly. The wind stopped. The insects vanished. Even the leaves seemed frozen in place. A low sound rose from beneath the ground. Not loud, but deep, as if something ancient had shifted. The stone trembled. The woman stepped back. Slowly, impossibly. the stone began to move. It did not split further. It did not crumble. It opened, the two halves, pulling apart as if guided by unseen hands. The child screamed. The woman lunged forward, her fear finally louder than her anger. But the forest does not move on human time. The stone closed. Again. There was no crack. No echo. Just silent. Silence. The child was gone. For a moment, the woman stood frozen, her mind refusing to understand what her eyes had witnessed. Then she fell to her knees, clawing at the stone with bare hands, tearing skin and nails against its unmoving surface. She screamed her child's name again and again until her voice shattered. The stone did not answer. When the villagers arrived, drawn by her cries, they knew where she had been before she spoke. The elders gathered around the stone. None of them touched it. One elder lowered his head and whispered. The stone listened. Another replied, barely audible, and it obeyed. No ritual could undo what had been spoken. The woman never returned home. Some say she stayed by the stone until her body could no longer endure the heat and rain. Others claim she wandered into the forest, calling out a name that trees refused to return. At night, hunters passing near the path claimed they heard something. Not screaming, not crying. A voice, thin and broken, whispering apologies into the dark. The stone never opened again, or so the elders say. Even now, people avoid that place. They lower their voices when passing nearby. Parents grip their children's hands tighter, without explaining why. And when outsiders ask about the stone, the villagers hesitate before answering, because it only listened once, they say. And we don't know what words might make it listen again. Some believe the stone is still there, unchanged, waiting, not for anger, not for cruelty, but for one careless sentence spoken when patience runs out. Thank you for hearing this story. See you in the next story.